All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We're glad that you were able to join us today. Just for anybody who's not familiar with our group, Paragus IT is an employee-owned outsourced IT provider. We work with a lot of businesses, big and small, across New England, helping them with their IT. Everything from their cybersecurity to their help desk, but also including things like their AI and automation strategies. And that's what we're going to be looking at a little bit deeper today. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So let's talk about why everyone is here. Uh, I would be shocked if there's somebody on this call who does not feel like lately they're a little bit busy, like there's more things to get done than there are hours or minutes in the day. And I think probably most of us here wouldn't mind having some additional resources, some additional help, some additional hands, people that we could delegate work to or get some assistance from. However, likely everybody here probably is also facing some sort of constraints on that. It could be constraints on your budget. It could be constraints on the amount of space that you have. Maybe you just don't have the time to find and onboard and train additional resources. So I imagine the reason you signed up to be here today and took time out of your calendar is you're probably wondering the same thing we were wondering. Can AI bots actually help you do more with less and really give you and your team some time back? And if they can, what does it cost and how hard is it to implement? So I think that's, I imagine, kind of where a lot of people are coming at this conversation from. And so that's how we're going to explore today, and that's how we're going to proceed. So I want to start with what kind of was the Paragus journey. How did we approach this? So at the beginning of our AI bot journey, we felt like our resources were stretched really thin. Um, our budget didn't allow us to add additional headcount at that time. We also were noticing that bottlenecks were starting to slow people down. There was a few key resources who had certain information or who could make certain decisions. And if those resources were constrained, everybody else was waiting around for responses, for decisions, for actions to come out of those people. And those bottlenecks were starting to cause problems. We also found that when information wasn't flowing freely, what started to happen was inconsistent information started to be shared. So people would just say, oh, I think the answer is this, or last month somebody I think said that. And we started noticing kind of different versions of the answers being floating around the organization. And then finally, we also observed that noise was taking away from high value activities. And I use noise a little bit kind of playfully. There's requests that need to be addressed and handled by certain people, and there's requests that just they happen to be the people who handle them. And when I say noise, what I mean is the things that happen to be things that those people had to take care of, or were administrative tasks, or were just answering simple questions, were consuming a lot of time because they needed to be done, but that was taking away time from higher value activities. And for us, there's nothing more higher value than spending time with our clients, when really helping our clients and being able to spend more face time, more conversational time. But if we have to do a million things to get done through the end of the day, that gets in the way. So this is kind of where we started. This is how we launched our AI journey, and hopefully at least some of this will resonate with you. So where do we go from there? So first, we said, all right, let's look for tightly defined roles with very specific knowledge. Where are these opportunities? For example, HR. We only had one person doing HR, which meant there was a specific knowledge set that was pretty tightly defined. HR is not a huge, ever-evolving field. There's kind of, it's a little bit black and white for the most part, a lot of pretty strict regulations and rules and very specific answers to most common questions. So tightly defined, specific knowledge. That was a bottleneck for us. So that was an area that we immediately flagged. Okay, let's look at that one. The next thing we looked at is where are the highest volume of requests? Where do we see the kind of biggest opportunity to have an impact? If we only get a request for something once a month and it only takes 15 minutes, the ROI on addressing that is not going to be very high. But if we can look for these things that have daily requests, sometimes hourly requests, how do we tackle those and start to chip that away? And then finally, where do we have the lowest quantity of subject matter experts? So kind of going back to the conversation around, we maybe have a SME in HR. Maybe we have a SME in a particular piece of compliance. Maybe we have a SME in a particular piece of hardware. If we can look for our subject matter experts that are kind of acting as bottlenecks sometimes because we don't have an infinite number of them, that could be another good place to start. So these were the three things that we bounced around. We kind of got everybody in a room and said, if these were the three kind of criteria, what bubbles up for you? And we started making a list of all the different areas that we could approach using AI. So then, how do we build them? So it started with identifying the supervisor. Uh, and I mean this very seriously. We treat our AI employees as if they are employees. And I know that for some people that rubs them the wrong way. They don't like when AI is personified. But we actually found it was really helpful to identify if this is going to be a bot, who's going to be its boss? Who does it report to? Who is in charge of that bot? And I don't mean who created the bot. I mean who's going to manage and oversee and be accountable for that bot, because those often weren't the same person. We have a team of people in the company who are really good about building bots, but they're not the subject matter experts in what that bot should do or how it should respond, and they're not the one who should be supervising or providing any kind of oversight for that bot. So the first thing is, who's going to be the boss of this bot? If that's not clear, I would argue day one, you're already off track. You need to know who's going to own this. Then, working with that person and the team who's going to build the bot, or the person who's going to build the bot, start to define the scope. This is what I want this bot to do. And equally important, this is what I don't want this bot to do. And what you'll find in the world of bot building is the more narrow the definition of the job scope, the more effective the bot. So sometimes if we're looking at an entire position that we want to replace, we may need to create 4, 5, maybe as many as 8 or even 10 bots for that one position, because that person did so many different kinds of work. But what you really want to do here is look for a narrowly defined scope of work that this bot can handle, that they can be highly trained in. And if you need to have 3 or 4 bots, there's what's called bot orchestration, where you can build several bots that have one front-end bot, and that front-end bot hands it off to the other bots that are kind of subject matter experts or task experts. So it's okay if you have lots of different needs and requirements, but you want to spell that out as clearly as possible and have very defined scopes. The next is we have to decide what was going to be the technology platform that this was going to sit on. And what I mean by that is basically what was the LLM that we were going to leverage. We've got OpenAI, there's Gemini, there's Copilot, there's Grok, there's other ones out there. But those are the 4 major ones that we kind of experimented with. And we needed to figure out for this particular scope of work, which LLM do we think is best capable of doing this work? And I say it that way because it's not the same answer for every time. We have some bots built in OpenAI, some bots built in Copilot, some bots that use Gemini. So it really is a use case specific thing. And this is where your bot experts are going to be really handy, is being able to look at, for this scope of work that you've defined, here's the LLM that we believe is most effective at handling these types of things. From there, we selected the front end interface, meaning how are our employees going to interact with this bot? For the most part, as I'll show you later in this demonstration, the vast majority of our bots have Microsoft Teams as their front end, meaning that when you want to engage or interact with the bot, you're doing so as if you're talking to an employee. You're clicking on that person, that bot in Teams, and you're talking to them, chatting with them the same as you would if it was a coworker. We felt that that gave us the highest adoption rate because it felt natural, it felt comfortable. We were meeting our employees where they already were. We weren't asking them to take on an entirely new workflow or learn a new system or process. Now, I say that with a couple of exceptions. As I'll show you, we have a couple of bots that are not native in Teams. One of them we largely access through the web, and another one we actually largely access through voice, and I'll show you what that looks like. I will also tell you later, but I'll just drop a hint now that this stuff changes constantly, and the capabilities of these tools is changing constantly, so it's an evolving thing. The next is we started to curate the knowledge that these bots were going to need. And when we think about knowledge, we're thinking about both static and dynamic, and we're thinking about internal and external. So a static document that is internal could be your employee handbook. If I'm building an HR bot, a static internal document is I'm giving it a PDF of our company's handbook and saying, this is our company handbook. You're going to use this. A dynamic one might be I have a SharePoint library that contains all of my HR documents, and I'm telling that bot this SharePoint library is your knowledge base. That way, as I add documents to that SharePoint library, the bot is constantly being retrained and reassessed on what information is available to it. That's a dynamic data set. External would be something like a public facing website. So I'm taking this website and I'm saying, you need to know everything that's going on this website or this blog or this news feed or this RSS feed. And I'm saying that your knowledge is going to be ever changing. And this is going to be the data set that you're using to keep yourself up to date and current. From there, we then start building. This is kind of the exciting part. You start putting it together. You take the knowledge set, you combine it with the scope, the LLM, the front end, and you start bringing the thing to life and letting people interact with it and talk to it and play with it. And this is critical. It can be very tempting to just put these things out there and throw them into the wild and tell people to start interacting with them, but they need to be thoroughly tested. And you need to have really good criteria that you're using to test it. So for example, if you're building an HR bot, you need to have somebody who's in HR be able to really intentionally think about what are the types of questions that employees are coming to me? How do they phrase those questions? What exact wording do they use when they're asking me those? And it can be helpful to go back through old Teams messages or emails and really try to get a good list of here are very specific questions I've been asked before and the way they were worded. Then I'm going to take those questions, I'm going to feed it into the bot. And I'm going to see what the response is. And I'm going to, as the subject matter expert in this case, review the answer the bot gave and see if it is the same answer that I would have given, or at least the right answer. Maybe it's even better than I would have said. But I need to make sure that what it's saying is correct and that I don't need to provide a correction. It is very common when these things first come to life that they need some correction. They need some refinement. They need some adjustment to start to get them to a place where they're very consistently giving the right answer. I will say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, it is also important to keep your expectations reasonable. One of the reasons it's helpful to personify a bot is just like a human, they're occasionally going to make a mistake. They're occasionally going to get it wrong. If your expectation is that the bot 100% of the time answers every question completely perfectly, you're not likely going to be very satisfied. If that's your expectation of hiring an employee, you're also not likely going to be very satisfied. Find me an employee who never makes a mistake, and I will hire them from you. It's just not a common. You've got to kind of build in your expectations. I'm shooting for 80 to 90%. If they get the question right 90% of the time or better, I'm feeling pretty confident that this is going to reduce my workflow. And then what's really important is to think about that 10%. Not ignore it, but focus on it. If I know they're going to be wrong 10% of the time, what controls am I putting in place for that 10%? And there's ways that you can train the bot to say, if your confidence level is low, this is what I want you to say. And in certain bots, that's going to matter more. You also, in some of these LLMs, have the ability to actually control the competence level and the confidence level of some of these bots in terms of how confident does it have to be to answer the question versus when it throws up a, hey, I can't help you with that kind of thing. So those are all things you want to be thinking about. They all fit into that build and testing phase. Then from there, you want to introduce it to the company. And you want to introduce it the same way as you'd introduce a brand new employee, with a little bit of fanfare and some excitement and some enthusiasm. Encourage people to reach out and get to know them. Encourage them just to ask a basic question and just say hello. You really want this to feel like a member of the team, at least in our opinion. That's how we have found to get kind of some high levels of success and early adoption in this. And then from there, you want to measure the impact. Not every bot you build is going to break, the scale and change the game. Some of your bots are going to have very, very low impact, meaning they're not getting high usage or people aren't putting a great deal of value on the responses they're getting. Those are things that you want to monitor. And if you train your employees to provide feedback to the bots, they can simply thumbs up and thumbs down the responses they get. And you can look for okay, this bot had 5 responses this week, and of the 5, 4 of them people thumbs down, meaning this was not valuable content. That's a bot that should immediately probably be pulled and reanalyzed, and the manager should have a supervisory analysis of that bot and see what's working, what's not working. So you do want to make sure that you are measuring the impact and tracking what's working, how do we improve these? And that's all performance feedback that should go to the manager to continue to address and work on with the bot until it gets to a place where it is providing a high value impact. So that's how we did it. That was our approach, kind of our journey in a nutshell. From here, I'm happy to introduce you to our bots. This is 10 of our most popular bots. All of these bots are fully live and in production, meaning that our staff have access to them and are interacting with them in some cases on an hourly, if not daily basis. Some of them get less usage. It just depends on kind of the scope and the job. But I'll quickly introduce you to some of them and tell you kind of what they do. And then we'll get to the part where I actually demonstrate them and show you kind of some of the things that they've been able to do for us. So I'll start with Allie. Allie is our HR bot. She is trained to handle lots of HR questions. So things about time off and our employee handbook, things about leaves, things about our 401k and our ESOP plans, all of the kinds of questions that they have a pretty specific answer. They're not questions that require a great deal of context. They're fairly black and white, but they're also somewhat complex in that there is subtlety that you can't get wrong, and if you do, it could cause confusion. So she's very good at navigating that and helping keep some of those just basic HR questions off of our HR team. Next is Jack. He's our sales bot. For anybody who's in sales, you may know Jack Daly. Jack is built off of Jack Daly's personality and his kind of approach to sales, and he's been officially trained on the Sandler sales methodology. Jack is there to do lots of things, but predominantly his key focus is sales role practice. So he is one of the bots that we interact with through voice. And what he's most adept at doing is having a role practice session with one of our salespeople to give them feedback and coach them and help make them better salespeople. As you can imagine, there's an enormous value on this. Sales coaches are really expensive. They're hard to hire, and they cost a fortune. Having one that's available 24 hours a day who can do role practice when our team has time to do role practice on demand and for so little dollars it's almost negligible is pretty incredible. Jack has other jobs at Paragus, but predominantly that's his key function. Then we have Chatty Cathy. She's our comms bot. Her job is just to help make emails sound a little better. Verbose emails can be made a little bit more concise. Confusing emails, she might kind of help to shape the thread a little bit better. She's really there just as a quick bot to polish an email communication. If you've got like a rough draft or an outline of what you want to say, she can help you formulate that into a more cohesive thought. And she's going to do so in the Paragus voice. We know that people are using ChatGPT in our company to do things like write emails. What we didn't want was a huge spectrum of what our emails sound like in the outside world. We have a certain brand voice and identity that we wanted to maintain. And so we created Cathy so that everybody who's using AI to help them with an email is going to have a similar feel and output where it's going to be on brand and aligned with what we want putting out there. Not the super generic ChatGPT stuff that comes across super generic and like it came out of ChatGPT. Next is David the Nerd. He is our troubleshooting guru. So he is a bot that our staff can use when they're stuck technically. They're working on a support call. They've got something on the line. They have an error message they haven't seen before. David is there to coach them through step by step, everything to do, and help them navigate that process and hopefully solve the problem for a customer. Hal is our case notes bot. One of the things that's really important is at the end of our support calls, we document everything that we did on that call. And we want to document in a way that's really clean and verbose and that helps the next person to pick up where that person left off. However, at the same time, we have a huge queue of calls coming in, and it's very challenging for our staff sometimes to take the 15 minutes that it can take to draft really, really good case notes when there's another call coming in that we want to get to and help that person out so that person's not waiting. Hal's job is to take that information in a really rough format, make it really pretty, put it in the note, and do it as quickly as possible so that we can spend more time serving our clients and less time typing up notes. We have a similar version of him that we've created for a medical client that does patient notes. So a doctor's in the room charting a visit, and they spend a lot of time outside of that patient visit charting, putting all that into the EMR system. So a similar type of approach there. Elmarja is our marketing bot. Her job is to do things like write blog articles, create content for social media, help us with headlines for emails that we're sending, help draft our webinar content. She's there working with our marketing team to just make life a little bit easier when it comes to putting together our marketing stuff. Sydney the Simplifier is an incredible bot whose job it is to take complex topics and make them more approachable. Sometimes some of our technical staff are communicating directly with points of contact that are not technical, and they don't always have intuitively the great tools to translate what they want to say to terms that the client's going to understand. And it's not that they can't do it, but it can be very time consuming for them to really spend a lot of time thinking about what it's going to look like for them to translate this into something that's going to be understandable. So Sydney's great about taking these complex topics, making them simple and then digestible, and then giving them to the tech to give to their customer. Paragus Wayfinder is just our internal bot to help us find documentation. We document all of our processes. We have kind of a written way to handle everything that comes up, but it can sometimes be a little bit confusing to find the process or the policy for how do we do this or what does this look like. The Paragus Wayfinder is great about you just ask it a question and it will go to that process document, extract the answer, and give you the actual steps that you need without you having to track down the actual source material, open up the Word doc, read the whole thing, and try to digest all the information. CMMC SplainBot is one of our compliance bots. A lot of the work that we do for clients is helping them with their various compliances. CMMC is a compliance that comes out of the Department of Defense, and it's a compliance that a lot of our manufacturing clients have to put up with. It's a very dense topic. It changes, and it's not the easiest to translate from legalese into terms a customer can understand, sometimes even terms that our staff can understand. So the CMMC SplainsBot job is really just to take these really dense, complex topics and make them super understandable. And then finally, Scoping Sal. It's the most boring headshot, but Scoping Sal's job is to help our product engineers scope projects. So if they're working on a project or working on building out a proposal for a project, there's a million things they have to think about. There's so many variables and questions that they need to ask to make sure that the proposal they put together is actually the right proposal. Not only is it the right solution, but they've quoted the right amount of time so that we're not under budgeting or over budgeting the projects that we're quoting. Scoping Sal's job is to kind of be their assistant. They take a lot of data, feed it into him, give him raw notes, and he'll spit back out to them, hey, here's a couple questions I think you should look at, or here's what I think the proposal should look like. Here's how many hours I think this is going to take. His job is really to help them make proposals that are as accurate as possible with as few opportunities for things to get missed or dropped. So that's a quick high-level introduction to 10 of our Paragus bots. From here, I really want to switch over and give you guys a demo and let you start to kind of see some of the bots in action and show you how they work. So just give me 1 sec while I pull that up. So we're going to start off with Allie. Allie is our oldest bot and probably my favorite just because she was my first bot. And she is on the HR side. So I'm going to introduce you to her. Okay, perfect. So this is Allie. And I'm going to start off with just a really simple question today. I'm just going to phrase it. How much time or how much leave can I take if I have a baby? I'm not going to have a baby, but my wife might have a baby. So here's what she spit out. First, she referenced exactly where she got the content from. Per the Paragus IT Employee Handbook, this is what it says about having a baby, which could be birth, adoption, or foster placement. So first of all, it's saying Paragus is compliant with the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, and this is what FMLA gives everybody who is compliant with FMLA. You basically have a 12-week of unpaid but job-protected leave. That is the starting point. From there, she's citing that the company has its own paternal leave program. And basically, any employee who becomes pregnant, whose spouse, life partner becomes pregnant, or who is adopting can take 2 weeks of paid leave usable during the pregnancy or within 6 months of birth or adoption. Then she's saying, okay, there's also a maximum leave allowance. For birth parents, it's up to 20 weeks, and for non-birth parents, it's for 14 weeks. And leave time can be taken any time during the pregnancy or within 12 months of the birth or adoption. It doesn't have to be consecutive. Then she's going on to say that paid paternal leave and FMLA run concurrently if eligible. PTO or sick time can be used. Health insurance continues. And state laws like Paid Family Medical Leave Act override company policies if more generous. So then it says the handbook does not detail short-term disability or the Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave Act, but these may apply. For more information about this, please contact HR. And then she goes on to say, would you like me to map out an example timeline showing you how you could stack paid leave, FMLA, and PTO for the maximum time off? A couple things about this response. First of all, Allie might need to tone it down a little bit. But second, I have specifically told her that I do not want her trying to guess at Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave Act. It changes, the rules aren't always clear. It's a third-party approval body that we don't have control over. So she's very deliberate about saying, hey, I think this applies, but I'm not going to give you any information about that. I recommend that you reach out to hr.paragus.com for more information. So this is a good example of defining a boundary. She knows what she can say, she knows what she can't say, but when she can't help, she's not just saying, I can't help you with that. She's directing them very intelligently to a source or a resource that I want her to direct them to provide that additional information. And then she's on her own, and this is not in her programming, offering to help the employee by making this timeline of all the possible ways they could take our time off system and get the maximum number of days off. And if I didn't like that as her supervisor, I could go in and tell Allie, knock that off. Don't do that anymore. But if I do like that, I could actually tell her, that's great. I praise you for that. Continue to do that kind of thing in the future. And that's the kind of feedback that we expect the supervisors of the bots to provide to the bots. So that's Allie. The next one I want to show you is a voice bot. And what I need to preface this by saying is this is a perfect example of where the technology changes constantly. And we'll talk about this more in a minute. But I am just going to start by doing this. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to turn on audio. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to introduce you to Jack. And what we're going to do with Jack is we're actually going to talk to Jack using audio. However, what I was trying to say about change is that ChatGPT recently changed the voice that Jack uses and has gone from a voice that we were very happy with, that we had specifically chosen, to a voice that we actually don't like at all. But that's kind of an example of you just don't have complete control over all these variables, and stuff does change often, and you need to be prepared for that. So let me show you what I mean. Good morning. Can we do a role practice?
Absolutely. Good morning. So you want to jump into a role practice? Fantastic. You got it.
Can you be the CFO of a manufacturer?
Absolutely. I'll be your CFO of a manufacturing company, and let's make it fun, but a little bit tough. And before we dive in, just one quick thing. Are we talking about fully managed or co-managed IT services for this scenario? Let me know and we'll get rolling.
Yeah, let's do a fully managed role practice.
Perfect. Fully managed it is. All right, I'm your CFO, and I'll throw you a couple of curveballs just to keep you on your toes. Remember, we're doing this the Sandler way, so dig in with those questions, and let's see if we're really a fit. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and kick.
So I'm going to leave it there. But as you can see, what Jack is able to do is enter into a pretty detailed conversation with me Jack knows our entire sales playbook. He knows the agendas of all of our meetings. He knows the personality profiles of our target personas that we're selling to. As you could see, knows that we have two different offerings. We have a co-managed offering and a fully managed offering. And he knew to ask that question of, do we want to do this one or that one? And if we had continued on, he would have asked me for my opener. I would have thrown it out there. And what Jack does is he comes in and out of role practice. He will respond to my opener and then give me some feedback and then say, let's keep going. And he'll kind of bounce in and out, giving me feedback as we go. If I didn't want him to do that, I could ask him to suspend all of his feedback until the end, and we could just do the role practice more naturally, and then I could get the feedback at the end of the conversation. What, as you can see, I don't like about Jack is his voice stinks. That woman is not at all the personality of Jack, and we were very frustrated when ChatGPT changed it on us. But this is part of the nature of building these bots. Is they're dynamic. This technology is constantly changing, and so we're now looking at moving Jack to a new platform where we can pick a different voice that is more kind of aligned with his personality and with what we're trying to accomplish. All right, the next bot I'm going to show you is I'm actually going to show you two bots. I'm going to introduce you first to Kathy, and then I'm going to introduce you to Sydney. And the reason I want to do this is I want to show you a good example of how two bots with the same prompt can give very different answers. So first, we're going to remember Kathy is the one who's just designed to generically make emails sound kind of Paragusy and to make sure that they're professional. So we're going to start with her. I'm going to ask her to draft an email explaining that we installed a VPN certificate that we're going to be monitoring overnight, and then I'll check back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. So she drafted an email. It's nothing magical. I want to let you know we've installed new VPN certificate as planned. We'll monitor this overnight to ensure everything is running smoothly. I'll check back to you by 10 a.m. tomorrow with an update. In the meantime, feel free. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit more professional. It saved our tech a little bit of time to take like a raw content, turn it into something a little more professional, shoot it out. Nothing wrong with that email at all. And she is offering, can I make this a little bit more updated? Can I help you with it? But by contrast, what I want to show you is how Sydney would handle that exact same request. So this is Sydney. And remember, Sydney's job is to make complicated things sound less technical. So what she did is she said, I want to let you know, we've installed a new certificate after recent issues with your user's experience accessing the VPN. Think of the certificate as renewing your car's insurance. It's essential to keep everything running securely and reliably. So without being told where the technical piece of that email was, she was able to ascertain, okay, the VPN certificate may not be common vernacular to most clients. And she chose to pick an analogy to help a client better understand that. It's a super high level analogy. It actually isn't even all that applicable, but it gets the point across. This is just kind of annual maintenance that has to get done to keep things clean and up to date. And so she just helps to take something a little technical on her own and turn it into something that's going to be a little bit more understandable by our client who's receiving this email if they're non-technical. The next bot I'm going to show you is David the Nerd. So David, if you'll remember, is our troubleshooting bot. And what I'm going to show you we can do with David is I'm going to give him a prompt. The prompt is I'm working with a user whose Outlook crashed on their Mac. Below is the error log. Then what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to dump the raw contents of the error message. And as you can see, it's pretty significant. It doesn't make a lot of sense to most people. It's not going to be something that's intuitive to most people just taking a look at it. And while we're waiting on David to respond, if you guys have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or at least note them down, and we'll do some Q&A in just a few minutes. So this is his response. He's classified the issue. He thinks it's an Outlook issue. And the reason he's doing this is he is programmed to follow ITIL, which is a very specific way that issues are troubleshot in the IT industry. So he's formatting it in an ITIL format. He's classifying the issue, he's categorizing the impact, he's making some initial diagnosis. It could be Exchange Web Services throttling because of a sync limit. So then he's going to make a note. There's two add-ins that are active, Insights and Mail Archive. Ensure that Outlook version is compatible with Mac OS. They both should be fully updated. So then the troubleshooting. Start Outlook in safe mode, temporarily disable add-ons, clear the Outlook cache, reforce the sync, update and repair. And the hope is that one of those steps in this order is probably going to resolve the issue. But if not, we can continue to troubleshoot with David as we go. The other one that I'm going to show you is similar, is a bot that I didn't introduce. His name is Artemis. Artemis is kind of like my personal troubleshooting bot that I have built. We haven't brought him to life yet, but what I love about Artemis is he is trained to read screenshots. So for some of our techs, they don't even necessarily know how to describe what is going on. And so they can simply give the bot a picture of the problem. So in this case, I'm working with a user who's getting this error message. We're literally just going to feed a picture of the screen that the client is experiencing. And Artemis is great about processing that, understanding what's going on, and then confirming, okay, so is this a physical computer or virtual machine? Does the user report anything specific right before it happens? And has anyone intentionally configured the system to allow manual crash triggering, maybe for debugging? Now, they're going to say yes, no, I don't know. Then he's going to continue to troubleshoot and continue to ask questions until we get to the root of what's actually going on and provide more information. The next I'll show you is Amarja. Amarja, if you'll remember, is our marketing bot. And what you may notice when I'm pulling these bots up is we have these prescribed buttons that are already built out. So for example, we do have dad jokes all over our client portal. If you haven't noticed, it's kind of just part of our culture here. So if I just need to get a fresh dad joke and I'm kind of out of ideas, I can always count on Amarja for one, and she will work on that for me. While she's doing that, I'm going to get the actual prompt I want her to work on. We'll see if she comes up with something inspired. Why did the computer show up late for work? Because it had a hard drive. That's not great. It's very dad joke, though. So then we're going to ask her to draft a LinkedIn post promoting our November webinar for SMB leaders who want to know what's coming in 2026 as it relates to technology. We're going to ask her to include a strong hook, one concrete benefit, a crisp CTA, and 3 relevant hashtags. So this is what she spit out. Wish you had a crystal ball for your business tech. Join us for our November webinar. Reserve your spot now. Future business SMB tech and 2026 ready. So again, this is just a first pass. We may give her some feedback. We also gave her a very short prompt, but you get the idea of kind of how she might be able to help. The next bot I'm going to show you, we're getting towards the end of this, is I want to show you our CMMC Splain bot. A lot of our clients have to deal with complex, dense topics around compliance, auditing, finance, risk, etc. And bots like this can be incredibly helpful at digesting those things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the bot this prompt. The prompt is explain CMMC level 2 control AC.L2-317 in plain English for a small manufacturer. Give one practical example and state the evidence an auditor or assessor would be expecting in order to check off that somebody is compliant with this. Now, this could be HIPAA, this could be FINRA, it could be ISO, it could be SOC, whatever the compliance is that you have to put up with, or state data privacy laws. A bot like this can be really helpful about translating things into language that's easier to understand. CMMC is just such a great example because it is so dense and so complex that a lot of people have trouble making sense of it. So it spit out, perfect. What this really means is it's a requirement to have non-privileged users from executing privileged functions and audit the execution of such functions. And it's giving a source of where it's getting that information from so we can fact check it. It's further explaining in plain English, though. This basically says that regular employees, non-IT staff, shouldn't be able to do things that only IT admins or managers are supposed to do, like adding new users, changing security settings, or installing software. It also means you should have a way to record whenever someone does do an admin level function so that you can prove what happened if something goes wrong. This is an understandable statement that I could share with a small manufacturer and say, this is what this control means. But if you were to go to the CMMC website and look up ACL2317, it probably would not make any sense to you. Then it goes on to give me some practical example controls. I could set up two types of accounts, standard users and admins. I could track admin activity using a logging tool or some sort of auditing function. And then an evidence that an assessor would expect when they come in to audit you, they're going to want to see screenshots or list of user accounts that show that we have standard users and admin accounts, a written policy that explains exactly who has administrative privileges and who doesn't and how we handle that, logs or audit trails showing that when we do have administrative actions, we do log it and have track of it, and then a sample report, maybe taking a computer's log history and just showing what that looks like. And it's going on to say I can make the sample policy for you, or it could give you step-by-step instructions on how you would configure Windows to do this exact thing that you need to be able to do. Super helpful, and you can see how there'd be great ROI there. And again, this is a great example where we can't have 50 people who understand every aspect of this law on demand available for our staff at all hours. But we can have a bot who can do it. And so if our staff are coming into something they haven't seen before, they can start here, see if they can get an answer. And it really diminishes the amount of requests that are going to our subject matter experts who do need to understand this at this kind of level. And then I think the last bot I'm going to show you today is Scoping Sal. Let me pull him up on the screen. So this is Scoping Sal. And what we're going to do is you can see he has some pre-written buttons for predict the fallout. This is one of my favorite buttons where basically we're like, hey, we're doing this project. Tell me what's going to go wrong or what could go wrong, like almost like a pre-mortem. Help me understand everything about this project that could become a disaster so I can work backwards from it and try to avoid it from happening. In this particular case, though, we're going to give Sal basically what we call discovery notes. Discovery notes are when we start to scope out a project with a customer and we're starting to get our kind of arms around the project. So it has information about the current state, the business drivers, in other words, like why are they doing this? Constraints and risks. For example, they have low internet, their ERP system is stinky. That's a technical term. What success would look like, what we're scoping, and what open questions we haven't answered yet. So I'm going to give all this to Sal, and I'm going to say, turn these notes into a scoped project summary with assumptions, in scope, out of scope, milestones, and a rough timeline for 25 user cloud email migration. Boom. And then we're going to wait. Sal puts that together for us. And again, if you have any questions, I can see there's a couple in the chat that we will grab, but if you have any other questions, feel free to go ahead and post them in the chat or just get them ready and we'll go to open mic in just a few minutes. So as you can see, here's the assumptions. Necessary licensing will be confirmed and obtained. Adequate network bandwidth will be available. SMT relay configuration will be managed via the IP and SMTP auth is unsupported, and end users and stakeholders agree on timing to schedule as minimize. Here's what's going to be in scope. What's going to be out of scope is major upgrades or overhauls of this equipment, user training beyond the provided quick start guides, and performance optimization or enhancement of the legacy ERP system. Here's the milestones of what it's going to look like. And then we could go on and ask to build out detailed proposals, pricing, et cetera, et cetera. But you get the idea. And again, this is a function that would normally be done by a project engineer. And it's not that they're not still doing it, but they're being given a tool that is going to dramatically speed up the amount of time that it takes to do it. So they can spend more time talking to a new client or actually doing a project and less time doing the administrative work of preparing for projects. And this work is super important. So it's not that we want to minimize the amount of time we're spending on it, but we want to maximize our ability to do it and do it right. And this gives them the ability to do it quickly, but also to do it right at a very high value. So just briefly going back to the presentation here, our bots out of the way. Switch back to this. So I want to talk just quickly about the ROI and the results that we've seen. So I'll start off by results. Our outputs are more accurate. The outputs are often more detailed, and they're getting a significantly faster response. So what do we mean by that? Basically, if we looked at the types of things that our bots are handling compared to how they would have been handled before the bot existed, the outputs are more accurate than the previous response because, like as you saw with Ali or with Scoping Sal or some of them, they did a more thorough, more detailed job than a human would normally do in that same circumstance or situation without much additional prompting. Second, they were more detailed. They gave more information. They cited different sources. They gave you places you could go. There was more information there. So the information was accurate and it was very detailed. And then the response was instant, almost instant, as you saw. It takes a few seconds for the bot to process and respond, but it's much faster than sending an email, waiting a day, waiting 2 days, waiting 3 days for some subject matter expert in the company to get back to you. So much faster response time, 24 hours a day accessibility, more detailed, more accurate. That's a pretty, high bar to hit. In terms of ROI, so kind of where does the rubber meet the road? So today, our bots are handling between 1 and 20 requests per day. So the average is about 2.5 requests a day. There's 15 minutes to 1 hour per request as compared to a human doing it. So if we average that out, it's about a half an hour of time saved per request that the bot is handling. So figure 12 and a half hours per day is about 3,200 hours per year if we have 10 bots handling 2.5 requests a day and saving us a half an hour each time they do that. That math adds up to about 3,200 hours a year. On the cost side, so yes, we're an IT company. We have a little bit of an advantage here, but it took us 5 to 10 hours to scope, build, and test on average. So the average, if you took it, was about 8.5 hours per bot. So take each bot, each of them on average about 8.5 hours to build. The monthly cost to run those bots is between $5 and $50. And it all depends on which LLM we used and how many requests that bot is getting. We're not buying everybody like a $30 a month ChatGPT subscription. That would be very expensive. What we're doing is using the APIs to pay on a per token basis and paying every time the bot is used, but not just to have it exist. On average, our bots cost us about $18 a month each. So the monthly maintenance that we need to do on these bots to keep them up to date, to train them, to improve their skills, to correct wrong information, to fix things that have changed on the LLM side, it averages out to about a half an hour per bot per month. So if we add all that up, we're spending about 145 hours in year one, which includes the initial development time, and then about $2,100 in fees to save 3,200 hours a year. Year two, the ROI will be even higher because we won't have the 850 hours that it took to build the bots. We'll just have the half an hour of maintenance on those bots. So the initial year, we have to cover the development and the maintenance, whereas on an ongoing basis, it's just that half an hour a month to maintain them. As you can imagine, the ROI here is very obvious. And even if we valued our time at $200 an hour, $250 an hour, and did the math, the ROI would still very much be there comparatively to what the cost of the bots are. So from there, just a quick recap of what we learned in our own journey. So first, the interface matters a lot. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but bringing the bots to Microsoft Teams was a game changer. We built a bunch of bots in ChatGPT and sent out links to them, and we got nowhere. People don't want to learn a new interface. They don't want to break their workflow and open up some new tool, go to some website. They want it to be where they are. So it mattered a lot where the bot lived, or at least where the front end of the bot lived. We also learned that first impressions mattered a lot. If you launch a bot that is not properly tested and they give a couple of crappy responses, people write off the bot and they're very hard to win back. It's a lot like you hire a new employee, you say, this is our new expert. You ask them a question, you get a really bad answer. You're probably not going to go back to them a whole lot more. So these first impressions matter, and it's important that you do a really good job of testing and vetting them before you introduce them because it will make an impact. Bots need to know how to answer a question, but also, as I was talking about earlier, how to not answer a question. What you do not want is your bots hallucinating and making stuff up. That's a real problem with AI. And so it's really important to teach your bots how to not answer certain questions and where those boundaries are. It's also important, as you saw with the bots I demonstrated, almost none of them asked me any clarifying questions. There's a really important line here. In order to get really detailed, complex answers, bots do need to ask follow-up questions. But in order to give quick responses, you don't want asking a lot of follow-up questions. So each of the bots is trained to kind of give an initial response, but then say, hey, I can do more if you can answer this question for me. And that's kind of the balance that we have found. But for certain bots, we wouldn't even want to give an initial response. We would want the bot to always respond with some clarifying questions to make sure they fully understand before they start giving an answer. And then, as I mentioned, everything is changing often. It's changing so fast. We constantly are tweaking, changing, adjusting because the technology is tweaking, changing, adjusting. What our bots can't do, they don't make good judgment calls. They're not supposed to. That's not what AI is good at yet. They don't know unstated context, and they don't necessarily know how to ask for it. So, like a good manager, if you come to me and ask me a question that you shouldn't be asking me, my first question is going to be, why are you asking me this? The bot doesn't know to do that. The bot is just going to answer the question. And so there's certain questions that you don't want the bot just answering because they're questions that ought to be flagged as like, why do you need to know the answer to that? Or where is that coming from? It's not going to guarantee correctness, nor is an employee. So that's something to be aware of. It will not, well, it will create net new stories, but they're not facts. It cannot make up information. It can't create a policy. It can't decide what something should be. And that's an important boundary to set and to understand. Our bots do not speak to clients. We are very adamant about that right now. We have aspirations of getting them to a place where we feel like we can let them talk to our clients. But right now, we do not let our clients talk to bots because we want to make sure that that experience is better than a communication with a human being. And it's not there yet. They don't do a good job of interpreting intent. So they're not good about understanding kind of the why behind or understanding what's really happening in a situation, the kind of subtle context. And our bots do not operate autonomously yet. Not that bots can't, ours do not. They always have some level of human intervention involved. However, here's where we're going. We want to get to a place where we have basically inline coaching for every single employee. So everybody has a personalized bot that is specific to their job at Paragus, and that bot is basically with them at all times. It can be listening to their phone calls they're having with customers. It can be reading their emails. It's working with them almost as if you had an assistant sitting at your desk at all hours of the day, watching everything you're doing, and just giving you feedback. Hey, I think you could tweak this email a little bit, or hey, I think you should try troubleshooting it this way, or hey, I think you should do this. Just like a voice within the ear who's giving you tips and feedback as you do your job on a daily basis. We want to work on pattern detection and awareness raising, looking at lots of data and looking for subtle signs that something could be off and flagging it. Doing data analysis and recommendations. So looking at what's going on in the business and recommending to us, hey, I think you should hire another person here, or I think you don't need as many people here, or I think you should improve this process, helping us identify ways we can make the business better. And then more integrations, having our bot be able to talk to more of our line of business software. Right now, the bots and the software are fairly separate. We want to do much more integration where they're able to automatically go in and make a ticket in our ticketing system and put that documentation in there rather than just writing the documentation for the tech to put in there. So the last thing I'm going to end on is we have talked to a lot of businesses who say, hey, I've been starting to experiment with AI. It doesn't feel like I've made a lot of progress. It doesn't feel like we've moved the needle a whole great deal. And then we've talked to other businesses who are like, hey, I'm successfully avoiding AI and I don't seem to be disadvantaged for it. There's a reason for this. And the reason is some studies have recently concluded that the AI impact follows what's called an exponential growth curve. In other words, in the beginning, the difference between customers or businesses who are investing in AI and who aren't is going to be very subtle. You're not going to feel a dramatic change in your business at the beginning of your AI implementation journey, nor is the business who's not doing it. But as time goes on, you're both building up momentum. One is building up momentum in the wrong direction, and one is building up momentum in the right direction. And these technologies compound upon themselves. People understand what's possible, they implement them, they get more excited, they do more things, and it starts to grow. And the difference between those and the ones who aren't becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we very much caution businesses that this is something you do not want to be ignoring right now. It may not feel like it's going to be a game changer tomorrow, and the reality is it probably won't be. But you are building the flywheel. You are getting the momentum that is going to matter 6 months from now, a year from now, and certainly a few years from now. So you definitely do not want to be ignoring this. You want to be looking for opportunities to leverage AI. And with that, I am happy to switch it over to questions. Feel free to unmute. I also will just grab the ones in the chat while you guys are thinking. The first is, where can we access these bots? So you can't access these bots. These are our bots. In other words, they live entirely inside the Paragus ecosystem. None of them are accessible to the public. We do build bots like this for customers trained on their data and their business, but these bots are very much kind of internal Paragus bots. How do you introduce AI bots while setting the expectations with your employees that they are not being replaced, or are they designed to actually replace people? It's a great question. I think this is the fear and anxiety that keeps a lot of businesses from being able to execute more on this. Really, what I think this is about is you introduce the bots as a way to help your existing staff be able to do more and to do it faster. And where I strongly suggest you look at is if you go back to the very beginning where we talked about what work we originally slated to have bots address, that was an open conversation with the whole company. We got a lot of different people together from different positions and said, what work do you think would make good work for an AI bot to help you with? What work do you not enjoy doing? Do you find to be very repetitive? Do you find to be very, that takes you away from doing your higher value activities? So part of it is making sure you're identifying the work that your staff are excited to see automated. Also, if you're looking for where do they face bottlenecks, getting information from HR, getting information about compliance, and giving them a tool or resource, that doesn't feel like you're taking anybody's job away. You're actually making them faster and more effective at their jobs. I think the long-term impact is not that we will replace people as much as we won't need to hire as many people. If a product engineer can spend 20% more time doing projects and less time doing proposals, we may be able to not need another project engineer for 20% longer than we otherwise would have. So I think it's about needing a smaller workforce to do the same work, not so much about like replacing people tomorrow and removing jobs from the organization. Somebody's asking, I have PMP certification that I'm thinking about expanding it to include the PMI, CPMA, CERT, Certified Professional in Managing AI. Does anyone at Paragus have certification or could recommend it? I am not a great expert about who on our team has which certifications. It's definitely a question I can ask our director of projects and find out more. But I do think that this is what you're describing sounds like a great opportunity where you could definitely do something with AI to address that. Somebody's asking, why do they cost so little? I think a lot of people, when they start experimenting with AI, what they do is they think they need to go out and buy like a $30, $40, $50 subscription to one of these AI tools. And while you may have a couple people in your organization who do need that subscription, if you buy one of those for every single employee and you've got 50 employees or 100 employees, the cost starts to really add up and it can start to feel like, are we really getting enough value out of that? When we do it the way that we're doing it, which is based on using the APIs and paying for consumption, there is no monthly cost from the LLM unless the bot is used. And then when the bot is used, we're only paying for what they call tokens, meaning the amount of data that's being exchanged and processed. You'd be amazed at how little that actually adds up to be. We're talking $2 to $3 to $5. I think the average is like 18, and that's because we have a couple of bots that are really more like on the $50 level. A lot of our bots are $5 to $10 a month. And that's just because that's the amount of consumption they get and the types of questions they're getting and how few tokens it takes to answer those questions. So a great myth in AI is that it's very, very expensive to build these bots and it's very expensive to have these bots. Both of those are completely inaccurate. You can build these bots very cost effectively and you can run them very cost effectively. In fact, in our bot building service that we do, oftentimes what we're doing is just creating the bot as a monthly subscription. You're paying us X dollars per month, and that includes the initial build out, all the ongoing maintenance, and the token consumption costs from the LLM provider. And that can be a very low cost way to get started because you don't even have the upfront expense of those hours to actually build the bot day one. But it doesn't, even if you did have those costs, it's still very reasonable. are our bots running in Azure. So some of our bots are Copilot bots, meaning they are native to the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Some have a backend that is on an LLM like either OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, or Gemini, which is Google. But then there is something called an Azure bot service that basically acts as a broker to take the request from Microsoft Teams, send it to the LLM, get the response, and put it back into Teams. And so there is an Azure component to probably every single one of our bots except the voice bot, which doesn't natively work in Azure right now. But next month, we are launching a voice version of Jack that'll be native to Teams because Microsoft just published that technology is ready for consumption. So again, these things change constantly, and we're always upgrading and improving our bots. Where does one go to start the bot building process? So if you are a Microsoft 365 customer, a site that I would highly recommend you check out is Copilot Studio. Copilot Studio is really made for the average person to be able to start experimenting with bots. So this is what Copilot Studio looks like. And basically, you can come in here and it's kind of like Microsoft Clippy was in the day. Like, hey, it looks like you're trying to write a letter. This is, hey, it looks like you're trying to make a bot. And you can just describe to Copilot Studio the bot that you're trying to build. And it will guide you through the process of building out that bot, recommending what knowledge you might want to link. It makes it fairly intuitive and fairly accessible for somebody to build a bot on their own. Now, these are not going to be the most sophisticated bots with the most complex abilities, but they are kind of low-hanging fruit just to get you started and to get a sense of what are some of the things that bots can do. There's even example bot templates you can choose from if you don't even know where to get started. And then when you build these bots, it will give you the ability to then launch them into places like Microsoft Teams. Again, fairly intuitively. You may not have the permissions to do some of this, but you can get to where you can get to, and then you say, okay, I'm ready to have IT publish this bot to Microsoft Teams. Here's the people I want it to get out to. And IT can obviously help you with that from there. I know we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to move to wrap up unless there's any final questions from anyone. So before I just close out, I just want to quickly share a update on our next webinar that is coming up. So we have a webinar in November, which is about the latest threats in cybersecurity. That landscape has changed dramatically in a very short amount of time. And so what we're going to do is use this as an opportunity to catch clients up to speed about what are the latest types of cyber attacks that are really taking down businesses and proving to be very effective, and giving you some insights around what you can do to better navigate those. So you can sign up for that webinar using the link in the chat. It's also published to our website, and we look forward to seeing you there. If you have any follow-up questions or want to talk about this bot conversation further, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to talk offline to anyone with questions. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I thank you for attending.